regardless, though, the thing is that I've come across it with a few interviews that I have read and seen with you online. How I come across with you, and you let me know if I'm wrong, but you seem like a very invested person. If it's something, I mean, obviously it's not unique in that respect, but you seem very invested with something that obviously has to speak to you, but in some way or shape or form, you take a piece of something of your life, because I think that's one of the things that was motivating for you in telling a story, that has to take a piece of something from yourself that you can inject into the story, whatever the narrative may be, but it has to be something that you can in some way should relate to, given the films that you've come across in the past, that you've taken a piece of something that you have connected with. And that's with everybody, of course. But the reason I'm bringing it up that with you in this regard is because having heard Adam share excitement about Out of Exile, which is a film that you have directed, which should be coming out later this year. He didn't get delve into the story here for obvious reasons, but the thing that he kind of hinted at was that it's a very good story that he felt like it brought the best out of him. So for me to hear Adam say that, because I've seen what he's done in the past, and I love his capability when it comes to acting, directing, and writing, and so on. Totally. So for him to say that, it got me more intrigued to want to check out the story. So basically what I'm trying to come to with you right now is that, considering the amount of work you've done and how things are starting to look for you since things have kind of picked up for you, as far as the scripts have been handed out that have piqued some interest for a lot of high caliber producers and so on and so forth. I'm wondering now, since now you've directed this movie and then taken the chance of working on a project where you had, I would say, the most control over, because knowing that if you had more money involved, more people will have their hands in the cookie jar, therefore you have less control in the overall property. So coming from the amount of attention you were getting and then working on a project where you have the most control, I'm wondering how things have progressed for you now, considering how, where you were being seeked out and the projects you've been able to choose, and how things have been going for you moving forward there. And if you still have more or less the same interest from other people who have expressed interest in you before, since you've started with that project. I hope that wasn't a elongated question, but I hope you understand where I'm coming from with that.
Yeah. To answer your question, all my stuff is on my editor's page.
Okay.
I've used the same editors ever since I started making films, I guess in the late 2014. So I've only been doing this 8 years. It's my 8th year. And so I've used the same editors. They're twin brothers. And so it's under their page, their Vimeo page. It's called Warren Bros Vimeo.
Okay.
And so all my stuff's under that.
Okay.
I've done, I guess, over a dozen short films.
Yeah.
A couple of feature documentaries.
Right.
The feature film that me and Adam did, I wrote and directed that.
Right.
And then I'm writing and directing a movie this fall with a lot bigger budget. But I've written about 23 screenplays over the course of like the last 2 years. And so 8 years making films, 10 years started writing. When I graduated 2012, I went to a 2-year digital cinematography, like just a certificate program thing in Arizona. Right. And because that's what I wanted to do, was cinematography. But then when I came back to Oklahoma City, I was trying to get into the scene, and
and the community out there was kind of tight knit and wouldn't let you in, more or less, as I can remember.
Yeah. And everybody was already sort of bonded together in their old families. And then the stuff that I was getting, I just wasn't connecting on the scripts, because I just didn't feel like the writers I was working with, or the directors, the scripts just weren't up to par for me to go shoot. So it sort of, nothing against them, it was just the very early stages of their careers too. And so I started writing some stuff that I thought that I would want to shoot, or I'd want to see. And then I was working as a casino manager at that time. And
I remember you saying that.
And so that helped finance a lot of my stuff. And I just put all my focus sort of into filmmaking, all my money, and it's crazy. If I've had any success in this business, it's because I've had a healthy obsession for this.
Right.
That's all I literally do. I actually quit my day job in 2019 and done this full time ever since. And so to get paid to do this for the last 3 years and make a living doing it, it's a lot of people want to ask me how I did that. It's just there's a Man, it's a long hustle and
Yeah.
grind.
It's a culmination of
There,
things. Yeah.
yeah. It's
Yeah.
being lucky in LA
Yeah.
too, and having a lot of screenplays and meeting people and just you hear all the stories about how
Yeah.
did people break in and knew somebody, and me growing up, I didn't know anybody in the film industry, and not one person. Uh, but the more I sort of got into the short films and feature docs and writing screenplays, um, I would just keep me as a producer, filmmaker, like for Water Gap or for the documentary I won an Emmy for, the Standing Rock Project, or
Yeah.
music videos I shot with famous actors and their bands. I've got these jobs not through agents, not through friends. It's just been me sort of prowling the internet at 2 o'clock in the morning and just keeping an eye open to opportunities. And I'll see an opportunity and I'll just ask a question. And that question leads to this and that. And the next thing you know, you're headed to North Dakota, or you're headed to Pennsylvania, or you're headed to
Right.
New York, or you're headed to New Orleans, and that's kind of how my career was. And but again, with each one of those projects that I was interested in, they said, well, what have you done? And then I was able to show them because I had so much stuff done. And they're like, oh, okay, yeah, you're a filmmaker, or oh yeah, you've written some stuff. So, or my managers vouched for me or something. So it's again, going back to the healthy obsession. This is all I do. I feel like if people want to make it in a business, it's sort of what they have to do. I think it's just because you kind of have to think about it all the time, and the universe will just sort of reward you because you've worked so hard at it.
So here's what I wanted to ask you about this here, because the thing that was actually interesting, because I've heard the story before too that you're just sharing now, where one thing led to the next, and then it granted more opportunities. Where again, I was touching on before that you were shown interest in what you were what things you've written, some of the short films you've come across that you've done that people have come across and realized, okay, so you can direct, so we know that you can do that, and then want to see what else you've done along the way. So generating that amount of interest for yourself. um I know I'm not sure if it's a fair question to ask, but I'm really curious about your perspective, because in my mind, you're pretty much in a really unique position where you've had a full-time gig, and then you were able to quit your full-time job to go into filmmaking full-time. So in doing that, when you had decided to go down that route, were you coming from a position where because I'm curious of how you were able to make the decision for you to say, okay, I'm done with this and moving with this now, because obviously one of the biggest things that I think some people may not realize, or may realize, but they just want to know from your perspective how you dealt with it, is that, okay, so if you're doing full time with filmmaking, what are the chances that you're not going to be able to make money in the next coming months here? Because it's a very fickle thing. It could be either you do very well for a short period of time, and the next thing you know, it dries up like that. So for you to be able to have this career so far in the last couple of years, making that decision for you, what has been helping you in that regard to be able to sustain yourself, apart from people meeting out with you and paying, hey, we'll buy your script, which I would imagine kind of help sustain that to some degree. But to be able to work on the next project, to be able to showcase that, okay, now that I've got this done here, the film hasn't been released yet. When I'm referring to Out of Exile, but I would imagine that with that film being done and eventually being released, if that also generated some interest, so people say, okay, so since you've completed that film and it looks really good, or I'm not sure if they've seen it, but they were confident with the people that you've worked with here, considering the talent level that you have in that film, if that generated enough interest for them to say, okay, so we want you to work on another film, or see what other films you have, but if it's if it's up to par, we'll fund you more money as a result of what you have seen so far and what you're capable of pulling off next, and we're trusting that this film will do very well, so therefore we're taking the risk to offer you more resources and funds for the next film. So again, that's a elongated question here, but I'm really curious to how that all came to be, because it's a risk that I think people don't really understand, that doesn't always happen with a lot of people, but you seem to be in a unique position where people have taken interest and have kept up with that interest for quite some time. So I'm wondering how that was like for you, from there up to this point.
Yeah, man. Again, it all started with the work. It was, 2014, it was just a short film. The next year I did 2 or 3 short films. And I think every time I do something, I try to make it better the next time. And so I would put, every time I'd do a short film, I'd put into a local festival, I'd get a nomination or I'd win a small award. And I think it just gave me the momentum. And I remember writing like 7 screenplays, feature-length screenplays, and I would never show them to anybody. Those are just like the first 7 you collect, dust on a hard drive forever. Yeah. But in 2018, I'd written, in 2016, I wrote a couple of crime dramas. And then 2018, a buddy of mine who wrote for Variety magazine, he was doing some script consulting work for a major film with a big star attached. And I saw him talking about it on Facebook. I reached out to him at 2:00 in the morning, just casually. And it was just like, hey man, you're doing the script consulting gigs, And he was just like, yeah, man, like $400 a script. I'll read it and give you some thoughts. I was like, okay, whatever, here you go. It's one of those things where as a producer, you have to finance your career. And so I sent it to him, these 2 scripts. A week goes by, he gets back to me. He's like, hey man, he's like, I read your scripts. It's better than the thing I'm doing right now. He was like, do you mind if I show this to the producer? I was like, well, who's the producer? And he was like, oh, it's the guy who wrote, Ken Nolan, who wrote Black Hawk Down. I was like, okay, yeah, sure. And so that just went, he read it and he sent it to this guy, and this next guy read it and sent it to this producer. This producer, he's a very big producer.
Jerry Bruckheimer.
No, he's probably not known, I guess, to everybody, but he has done a lot of stuff. He's produced the Final Destination franchise. He also produced the American Pie films, the franchise of those films. So he's sort of like he likes the horror,
niche. He found a niche market that he's been successful in here. Yeah,
horror films.
Yeah,
franchise stuff. And he read it, and this was kind of like a Winter's Bone type crime drama. It's called Bloodroot. Mm-hmm. He read it, and even he could recognize that there was something interesting about it, and so he was like, hey, I don't really know what I can do with this thing, but I can introduce you to some people. And next thing I know, I have 6 managers, and they wanted to read sort of like the last 4 or 5 things I'd written. I sent it over, and they, all 6 of them wanted to rep me. So I had to choose which one to go with. And then I had to call each of the other ones and say, I'm sorry, I'm going with these other people. That was tough, but that was in 2018. And then
it's a good spot to be in, I would imagine.
Yeah. Well, I'll get to that here in a minute. Okay. How being your own producer is sort of the best way to go anyways. Mm. But for a year, 2018, probably May 2018 till July of 2019, basically what I did was my managers introduced me to the town. So they'll send out my scripts all over the place to every agency around, every production company. And Bruckheimer, I was at Bruckheimer. I was at Bad Robot. I was at a lot of places with a lot of different scripts. So I got to meet a lot of different producers, independent producers, and the big time studio guys. So 2019 comes along, and because I'm Native American, I'm Hawaiian, and also enrolled tribal citizen, this company was needing a writer for this Jim Thorpe biopic. Angelina Jolie was producing it. Martin Sinsmeyer was going to star in it. Sterling Harjo had just finished writing a draft of it, which was really good. He's the creator of FX's Reservation Dogs now. Mm-hmm. So he wrote a draft. Then they wanted another, take on it. So I went in, I did my take on it, and they liked it. So then they flew me out to New York. I spent a week with Martin and the producing team. We were doing research up at Carlisle Indian School and in Pennsylvania, where Jim's mausoleum is. And we just did like a week's worth of research and wrote a script for them, got paid. And that's when I was able to quit my day job because they hired me to write the script. Since then, the script has moved into another company now, and another big time writer, Bill Collage, has come in to redo the rewrite. And he just wrote Emancipation for Will Smith that I don't know where that's at now after what happened with Will. Yeah. But I mean, it was an Apple, movie. So it was huge, like $100 million or something. So Bill wrote the newest draft of it. But there could be something really cool with that. I had a talk with the producer just a couple of days ago after I hadn't spoken with him in a year. So he's still interested in, we still communicate and talk. But that, getting paid to do that rewrite was enough to finance an entire year for me. And so that was the first year from 2019 to mid 2020. But then in early 2020, let's go back to late 2019. I'd done the rewrite. I had another film called Out of Exile that I had written. It was a crime thriller heist film, like a Hell or High Water meets, Ben Affleck's The Town.
Right. Okay.
It went around town, went around LA. I met with some people at Paramount who were interested in getting it. A Georgia producing team wanted to buy it, but they didn't want me to direct it, and I wanted to direct. And they were like, no, we'll just buy it and we'll hire somebody else. And so I wouldn't, I just held on to it. I told everybody, no. I just kept passing. Well, then 2020 hit, the pandemic happened, Hollywood shut down. But I wasn't ready to shut down. So basically, from the beginning of 2020, when the pandemic was starting, I went out and raised X amount of dollars, and we shot at the end of 2020. We shot Out of Exile, and then we did some pickup shots last year in May. And then the film is now, Saban Films bought it, and it's going to be released on VOD in October. But being the writer of the film, wanting to direct it, it just as a producer also, you have to fight for your stuff. No one's going to,
right.
Especially in the independent film world, no studio is going to give you money. No producer is going to give you money. You have to go find the money. And so, like, when I talk to a lot of other filmmakers, they're like, well, what do you mean? And who do you talk to? And there's no fixed list. You just have to kind of put it together from people that you know, or people that are close to you that they know, or you ask someone, hey, do you know any dentists, any lawyers? And you just ask for a pitch. And, when you're making a film that's under $1 million, or in our case, under $500,000, 10,000 here, 25,000 there, 50,000 there, it adds up pretty quick, especially when we went out and I just called Peter Green's agent and I was like, hey, I want to put him in my movie. And he was like, okay, well, are you financed? And I was like, yeah. You just tell them what they want to hear. That's what I feel. And I had enough money raised to escrow him already, so I can attach him to my film and then use his likeness to go out and get the rest of the money. Like, look, I've got so and so attached. I've got this person attached, and so that's what we did.
So it's like a building block of one thing to get to the next, here. So let me ask you about this process, because because you're coming from a point of view that I was very interested in seeing how you do from the ground up, because the one thing about this film Exile that I've come to learn that I've heard from another interview you've done, where having to get the money, and I think you've just mentioned now that it's under $500,000, but even with that amount of money, was that the targeted budget that you were looking to have the film done? Because I know that one of the things that you, if I recall correctly, you had said before was that some of the higher ups that were really interested in the script, they wanted to buy it from you, and I'm sure they're going to do what they saw fit and then be able to invest more money into it here, but probably completely diluting with what was already in the original script and making it something else entirely different. But the fact that you have been able to hold on, you held on to it to keep what your vision was for it. Did you have to not water down, but remove some things to be able to fit the budget that you were having to pull out to be able to tell the story to the vision that you wanted to? Or did you already have it in mind that, okay, so this is going to be the budget, but if a big studio wants to take over for me to be involved with it, then we can expand on other things that I can add on to it later on there? So I wasn't sure what the thought process was like for you in the initial process.
I don't think it was that. Okay. I don't think it was a thought that anyone else was going to come in and save the film or give us money for anything. I knew I had to keep it low enough that I could actually, raise the money and, and just focus on the rebates in the state and ensuring that my investors got their money back, because there's such a huge rebate in Oklahoma. So sort of your first money in investors, first money in, first money out type of thing is the rebate. If you're shooting, let's say, $300,000 movie and 30% of it's rebatable, then you're getting $100,000 back, as soon as you can turn in all your receipts. So, I mean, that first $100,000 is pretty easy to raise because you're promising, you're going to give all that right back right after we're done filming.
Did you already know that beforehand, or did you discover it as you were going along with this year?
Yeah. That's sort of what our goal was, to do it in the beginning.
Okay.
And then from there, we attach actors, and then and use their likeness and to motivate other investors. Like, hey, we've already got a third of the budget. We've got these actors, attached, and then it just starts. Things start falling into place. And that's the way it was for me.
Okay.
But I never wanted to. I wanted to direct. I had done several shorts, and I'd done a couple of feature docs, and I just won the Emmy for the film I did at Standing Rock. And so I thought, I've got all these scripts that I've written, these feature narratives, and I think that they're pretty good. I mean, I got repped in LA. I got agents and managers off of it, and I wanted to, make the segue or transition from doc features into narrative features. But I was going to give you that chance, and no one really wants to give you that chance. They want to take it and hire their own directors and make it for $5 or $6 million or whatever. But then you never get to where you want to be as a filmmaker by doing that. So I just held on to it and just made it my own way. And because I did that, one of the producers that I turned down from that wanted to buy it is now giving me the director's seat in my next for $4.5 million.
So, what about them making the decision to change their mind, or to decide, like, you know what, I want to give you this job here for you to work on the next project here? What was it about that thought process for them to be able to do that, to give you that opportunity? Because if you declined it, I think I understand that they're fully aware that this is business, so don't take it personal if you reject it, because I'm sure that's very common. But for them to come back to say, did they see the film? Did they hear about what you were doing? Was there a good word of mouth about what was going on for them to say, all right, this guy's legit, so let's give him money for this project over here?
Yeah, exactly. That's exactly it. They didn't talk to him for, I guess, a year and a half, and then I had just sent him a couple of stills, and he saw it. He saw the stills, and he's like, "Oh wow!" He's like, "What's your budget?" And I told him, and he was like, "Oh wow, can I see the film?" So I sent him. I guess it was one of our first cuts. It might have been last fall, and he watched it, and he just said, "Hey man, you're right for doing this. You were right for going to make it yourself." He's like, "It's really good. You did a really good job for low money." He's like, let's talk. Let's what else you got? And so we sent him another project. And at that time last fall, I was starting my own production company called Safe House Films, and it was sort of my mission, for that, or for the production company, was just to be a branded content company. There's a lot of production services companies. There's a lot of studios, but I felt like there wasn't a company that actually had material or could find material that they wanted to make.
I understand now. Okay, I got you.
So yeah, so my company makes certain types of films in the crime and action thriller space.
Is that your favorite genre, though, for you personally?
Yeah, I think so. That's what I mostly write: crime thrillers.
Yeah, because I can see the Heat poster behind you there.
Yeah. Oh yeah. Yeah. I mean, I've got Cool Hand Luke.
Yeah.
Alien, Sicario.
Yeah.
Those are sort of my favorite films, like Sicario. Hell or High Water.
Yeah.
Those types of movies, and so that's the stuff I write, and so I had a slate of projects, and I just started the company, and we raised a bunch of money. You kind of get ourselves off the ground and start putting some stuff out there, and he came back and he read this script we had and that we had purchased, and then I did some rewrites on it, and then now we're going to make a movie this fall.
So here's what I'm curious about with you now. The thing about the industry, because right now you've gotten some traction along the way, and obviously it took a while for you to get to that point. So I don't want people to get the impression that this happened, overnight, and all of a sudden things are going well. But the thing is that because the things have been moving pretty smoothly for you, at least for the most part, do you feel confident with yourself and the work that you've been able to provide for the people that have invested into or shown interest in you? Because the thing is that you don't strike me as someone that is cocky, but you're good at what you do. It's kind of the impression that I get. Like, I know this is good, and if I have someone else do it, it's going to ruin the work that I've put into it here because my name's attached to it. Then if one tainted project carries on and that's my reputation, I'm not willing to risk it for someone else to take over it and ruin the film. That's the impression that I get here from you. But But do you still feel confident with yourself, with not just because you're getting the attention that are presenting you opportunities, but knowing that because you've done what you've done and have been successful in having people take notice of that, do you feel that sense of confidence getting bigger as a result of that? I'm not talking about ego, but I'm talking about, like, I know I've gotten really good with this here and other people have noticed. So now I can expand on other things that I've been able, that women wanted to work on, that I probably weren't able to work on before. So I hope that question makes sense for you here.
Yeah, totally. Yes. I think I have the confidence. I don't think, I mean, there's always going to be ego, I guess, involved in this kind of business, but I try to be humble, modest. At the end of the day, as a writer, producer, director, if you're not doing the work, it's not going to be on the screen. You know what I mean? Right. And then it only takes one time to be proven that you don't know what you're doing, or that you're a fraud. And that's the scary thing when you put so much work into something. So if you write something and you just, like, dare I say, half-ass it, or when you're prepping as a filmmaker and you just don't do all the time that it needs to have, or when producing, it's going to show on the screen, and that's a direct reflection of the filmmaker, right? And so for me, it's all about the brand. And again, when you have a small budget film like Out of Exile, I still think it's a beautiful film. I'm very proud of it. The tone of it and the actors, I think we captured something really, really cool. But all that to say, kind of like, guess what am I trying to say? It's, you just gotta be humble. You just have to be humble, and it's going to take a long time. Right. But everything that you do is going to be a direct reflection of how much work you put into it. And that's making movies, that's raising money, that's writing scripts. It's such a hard business that I feel like if you don't have a talent for it, if you don't have good instincts for it, it's going to weed you out real fast, if that makes sense. Not that that's ego speaking, or that I'm lucky or anything like that. I really do feel that it'll catch up to you, and it'll weed you out in some ways, if that makes sense.
Yeah, I know what you're going with this here.
I'm not saying that's for everybody, but I can see how that would be for me if I let up off the gas a little bit. Because as an independent filmmaker, you just have to stay engaged with it, because on a producing level, you can write a really cool script, and it's really hard to sell a screenplay in Hollywood, unless, even with agents and managers, you can go all over town with a good script, and meet with everybody. And I've done so much stuff, man. I've developed stuff with producers. I've developed stuff with famous directors. I developed a TV series with a director who just come off The Conjuring 3. And he was a really nice guy. And I thought we were going to make this TV series called Southern Cunning. And I learned sort of the hard way. It's just how the industry is. But I can't be upset about it. It's just, things happen for whatever reason. And but you just have to stay true to your sensibilities in your own authentic voice. And that you'd mentioned that earlier a little bit. So I guess transitioning into that, my voice. Like an Out of Exile, for instance, it might be like a crime heist film on the external of it, but on the inside of it, on the heartbeat of the film, is a film about, like, failed parenthood.
Yeah,
and so I tend to write stuff like that, man. All my movies sort of have this core about, like, failed parenthood,
like a disconnect with the parents and the child. Yeah.
Yeah, I didn't know my father personally growing up. I wasn't close with him. He wasn't in my home. He didn't live with me. And so it was one of those things where, growing up, I don't even remember, like, my first real memory with him is, 5 or 6 years old, but I didn't even know he was my dad at that time. So, like, just kind of growing up like that, and knowing what that is. So I know what that was, living with that. Some people might know what it's like living with a deceased parent, or someone who's mentally challenged, or whatever it might be.
Instability. Yeah.
So I feel like you mentioned this earlier, but it's write what you know and be authentic to the voice that you know, because
Right.
you've lived that and you've seen it. And now I'm 39 years old. I'll be 40 on my birthday. And like I said, I've only been doing this 8 years. So, and I feel like I've gotten a little smarter. I've gotten more mature as I've gotten older. I'm able to slow down a little bit and see things. But if I would have tried to do this in my 20s, I probably would have given up. I needed to go out and live. I needed to go be in the military. I needed to go play in rock bands. I needed to be a nomad for a few years, and just kind of learn who I was and be able to, yeah, just sit back and kind of just examine who I was. And then I think that's really helped me as a filmmaker, as a storyteller.
Here's one thing that I think I connected with you because I did look into some of your previous interviews that you've done in the past, because one of the things that I've shared this before a million times, so if people have heard it before, apologize, but the reason I'm bringing this up here is because I always try to find something that I personally can connect with who I'm talking to, whether they have a field that may not be of interest to me as far as certain things they may do, but their story to me is what I connect with, and what they do for a living or whatever the case may be. I'm curious about what led up to that there. So I'm always interested in the person's journey, not the actual product in itself, if that makes any sense.
Yeah.
So a lot of the things that you have said, for me personally, that was one of the things that I personally have taken away from in the previous conversation you've shared in the past. And I think in a lot of ways, the things that I've picked up with Adam as well too, and what he brings to the films that he's worked on, bringing a piece of himself, and it's not uncommon for everyone to do that. But the reason why I find your story so rather unique is because, at least to me, you seem pretty even keel about how you go about certain ways. And I've said that before. A lot of people go, "Oh, you should have met me 5 years ago. I was not the guy that you think I am now." So, and I understand that. But for your story, for me personally, I find it really intriguing because you're walking that line, in my opinion, of being presented the high caliber affair with what Hollywood can offer, and that could be very attractive to a lot of people. And if a lot of people get attracted to that, not being mentally prepared and how to deal with themselves under those circumstances, they can fall apart rather quickly.
Oh yeah.
Especially if they're expecting these things to work out and they never do because they fall through for one reason or another.
Yep.
So the fact that you've been able to see more or less that side of the industry, being very close to it in that respect, and then having the ability to say no, despite the amount of money they were going to be offering to you, to be able to finance yourself and then write the next gig. So essentially, you didn't want to be like a day worker, like just write a good script. Here you go, and here's $1 million. Thanks for your time. Write another one. So that part I respect. But the part that I'm really focusing on with you is that you've been able to, at least to me, as I said, been able to maintain an even keel about yourself, where you figured out what was going to work for you and what wasn't going to work for you. That to me is the journey that I've taken away from you the most about this here. So for me to, because Adam talked very highly of Out of Exile, this is going to be a great film, and I believe him. But I'm also very excited about what it is you have held on to and why it was so important for you to hold on to that, for you to tell that story that way, because for you to be able to walk away from those temptations, I think that's the interesting part of the story, for you to come out with to finance the film, or find the financing for the movie, and then get the people to be invested. And then for someone to see the film and say, "This is awesome. Here's another opportunity here for you. Will you be willing to take it there?" And I'm sure there's stipulations that you say, "Okay, I will if X, Y, and Z are met with me." And I'm sure other things have to be compromised as well too, which I'm sure you've learned along the way. That to me is the most interesting aspect of the story. And I think that here's what I really would love to happen. And when Out of Exile comes out, I truly, truly hope that people take notice of it, not because it's going to be a great action thriller. I really do hope to take away from what you have invested to tell the story and why it's so important for you to tell this story. Yes, to be entertained, but rather to be walking away with something that they can connect with, whether it be with you or everyone else involved with the project here, but to walk away with something they connect with here, because If someone saw that before the film was released and took a lot of faith in what you're able to pull off here to present you those opportunities, I can only imagine what the rest of the world would be able to see in that as well too. I'm not a person who believes like in the universe. That's just my personal perspective here, but I truly do believe that if someone saw that, then I'm hoping it would catch on with everyone else here too. Again, we don't know how the business will turn out. It is a very fickle thing, which is why I was asking about your perspective on how you've been able to maintain this here, because it can go so for so long, and then next thing you know, it's taken away from that. But I think you strike me as a person that would be understanding. Okay, well, if it's taken away from me, then I'll start from the ground up and pick up and continue from there. So I don't mean to take away too much of your time with that here, but the thing that I'm really curious about with you now, after saying that here, is that you talked about how you were really invested with what you're feeling and passionate about in terms of the story that you wanted to focus on here. But I'm also really curious about how you are, if someone would approach you and say, we love what you've done with these films you've worked on, we really want you to take on this project here. It's a script that's already been written, but you have free reign to do what it is you want, but it's not going to be a genre or a type of story that pertains to what you always do. But we need you to stay on this path here for this story, because we think you can bring your sensibilities to make it to fit to a narrative you felt will be best to tell this story here. But it's got to stay within the genre. And it could be any genre that may be out of your comfort level here, but if given the opportunity to do that, as long as you have with those stipulations in place here, would you be willing to take a risk in stepping outside of the comfort zone and be able to take on a project that is completely out of your comfort zone?
I could say yes to that. That most definitely.
Okay.
But with saying that, I think it just depends on the project.
Right.
I have to, if I'm going to be asked to be a filmmaker on a movie, then I have to understand the story almost better than the writer does. Because if I'm not connecting with a story, then when I go to the talent and I start talking to the talent, when the talent reads the script, the first thing that they do is they come to the director, and then we have the one-on-one, like a Zoom call like we're doing right now.
Right.
And they'll ask some really hard questions, and if the director doesn't understand what those questions are, or doesn't know how to answer it, then it's not very good. I feel like it's not very good. So I have to be able to like personally connect to a story, just so I know how to tell it the right way. I've always told, like, even Adam, like me and Adam are good buddies.
Mm-hmm.
And I had 2 films last year I would say fall apart. It's not because a script was not good enough or a producer wasn't good enough or anything like that, because it's never like that. The scripts are usually always good, and the financing can be done, and we can go shoot a movie or even 2 movies. And man, it's just sometimes it's and I backed out of both projects as a director. And do I regret it? I don't think so. I think and when looking back, I say I just wouldn't make the best movie. It wouldn't go up on the screen, and it wouldn't be told with like you can tell when something transcends or when it's just a gun for hire. You know what I mean? And I just don't want to be a gun for hire for anything. I've got too many ideas. I've written too many scripts. I just feel like if I'm going to be asked to do a job, then I'm going to take it very, very seriously, because it's my career, right? It's all about that brand. It only takes one project for anyone to see. If I made Out of Exile and it's good, but then I go and make a $3 million movie that goes straight to VOD, but it wasn't any good, and then I go try to make a $6 million movie, maybe that talent that's coming onto that movie sees that $3 million movie and says, wait a minute, he had just enough money to hang himself. You know what I mean? So it's or not give a crap, really. And so it's not about the money for me. It's never been about the money. It's about the material and about me personally connecting with it and just understanding it. And I have found it a little tough as an independent filmmaker, being out in LA, working in LA and developing stuff with producers and filmmakers. You're doing that for like 4 or 5 years, and then you come and you try to do it in the independent world where writers have never developed stuff with Hollywood people. So they don't know how to ask hard questions, or when I'm asking them a hard question, they don't know how to answer it.
Right.
And so that's one of the things I'm trying to do, like when in like a screenwriting class, is like I try to teach.
When you're referring to the tough questions, what type of question are you referring to? Because in my mind, because I think I know where you're going with this here, but again, since I'm
Yes.
not in that field, the questions I'm thinking about are more. And let me know if I'm wrong. Are you referring to questions like what's going to be the story, and what's going to be the character's background, and what's going to happen if we don't have the funds for this particular scene because it's going to be very expensive? How would you go about changing it? If is that kind of more along the lines with what you refer to tough questions?
No,
Okay.
that was the producing questions.
Oh, okay. Okay.
Once you get into line producing and stuff like that, my stuff would be, what does the character want? What is his external goal? What is it that what is it that he's after, or he or she's after? So what is it that's a tangible, concrete thing that they're after? And then, so there's an external goal and there's an internal goal. But the
Mhm.
internal goal may not be readily known to them. It's something that occurs as the story kind of goes as it takes place.
I got you.
And so, and then that internal goal ends up becoming more powerful than the external one. So it becomes something that they learn. But then I also was like, what is the thing that haunts this character? Like, what is his ghost? What is his flaw? And then like, what are the themes? And so then, so like if the theme is failed parenthood, then in some ways, in every character that this main character goes on this journey for 120 pages with, or 100 pages or whatever, the themes are baked into everything. It's baked into the dialogue. It's in every character that this guy comes across, in his external path to his goal. He's internally dealing with the themes, and that's what becomes the turning point. So, like in Out of Exile, for instance, Adam's character, he gets out of jail after serving 16 years in prison.
Hmm.
What does he do? He gets out and he says, you know what, I'm going to get mine. So he goes back to work with his old crime boss, Peter Green, and starts
Hmm.
robbing banks and armored cars again, because he wants to raise enough money, get the heck out of town, and go back to where his mother raised him in this little fishing community when he was a kid. So that's his external goal. But what happens is, the failed parenthood theme, he reconnects with his estranged daughter, who's now in her 20s, and he fell out of touch with her. He's in prison and stuff, and she's in an abusive relationship, and she doesn't really want to have anything to do with him. And as he reconnects, he realizes the need to help her out of her situation is more important than his own. Meanwhile, all these external forces, the FBI is closing in on him. His crime boss that he's working for is actually an informant, and he's about to turn on him. It's all these things are kind of like closing in on him, but his external goal is now not as important to him, because his internal thing is more important to him, is to take care of his daughter more than his own. That makes sense. So it's
Yeah.
like, that's your story, your external and your internal wants and needs. And that's where I try to do when I get to a script. I'm like, this is the questions we need to ask, because that's your story. Robbing banks and being really creative with that's the icing on the cake stuff.
Right.
So that's when I learned from being out in LA how to develop screenplays. And so every time I write a script, no matter what it is, no matter what the main story, I might be just an alien invasion, or even though I don't write those types of movies, but that's your external thing. But then I come in here, what is this character? What does he want? What's haunting him? All these little things, and then that's what becomes the movie. And everything, and the external is he's just running from the aliens, if that makes sense.
Yeah, I know what you're
So,
saying with that.
yeah, and so that's how I look at movies.
Okay.
And sometimes you work on an independent project, and you sometimes you work with a great writer who reminds me of, like, when I was first beginning, in the first 10 scripts I wrote, he understands how to write. He knows how to write a script, or she knows how to write a script. But it's when it comes to getting those deeper themes and wants and goals. So that's where I end up determining whether or not I pass on a project or not. It's if those
Mm.
things can be answered clearly. So when an actor comes on, like when Peter Green comes on and says, what is this movie here? What is this movie about? Or why am I doing this? Or what is my intention? Or it's just, you just have that there, so you can say, well, this is your intention here. And he'll be like, oh, okay, I get it. And then we can shoot the scene.
Interesting.
Yeah, it's just, that's how I instinctually work, I guess. And to me, I guess, so
Do you,
far.
so for you, because I mean, what you just explained there to me is quite quite in depth here, but here's what I'm also curious with you now, because
Yeah.
you've had you have seen interest from some high caliber people, and obviously now you've already touched upon before that you've been presented more opportunities to work on other projects here. But walking away from the offers that were given to you about several scripts, especially one that you wanted to direct, where you know that it's probably a good chance that you may never receive those offers again because you've walked away from them, and now you are taking the chance on yourself and having other people take chances on you to be able to invest in this project. That it's a shot in the dark where it could work or could not work. Was there a part of you that doubted that, okay, if I can't get X, Y, and Z by a certain time frame, there's gonna be a good chance that I can't go back to these guys and say, hey, by the way, this script is now for sale. I mean, I'm not saying you're going to be doing that there, but I'm just saying something along those lines where you realize that those opportunities may never present itself again, if especially if you walked away on more than one occasion from several different offers that were presented to you. So I'm curious about taking that risk and knowing what those risks are going to be. And thankfully it worked out. But if it hadn't worked out, what would have been your game plan at that point?
Yeah, okay. Yeah, man. Great question. I have managers and agents in LA. Love them. They have the best, and they represent some really high end clients, and they get work sent to people. You know what I mean? They get good paying jobs, and I've had a couple sent to me, and um, on more than one occasion. And most of them are writing gigs. And how do I say this? Um, it's just something I didn't connect with. It could have been a six-figure paycheck on a TV series, and it goes right back to this thing. It's like, no matter what you do in this industry, writing, directing, producing, it's never going to be easy. So if you're gonna sit down and you're gonna commit 6 months of your life to something, you're gonna have to write X amount of episodes for a TV series. You need to understand it. I feel like I, as an artist, need to understand it 100% through and through. I have to ask hard questions, and because there's a part of me, and I can't speak for everybody, but there's a part of me that feels like if I don't understand it, I'll be a fraud if I don't ask enough questions, or I you'll be exposed as that fraud,
So
and
like a
you
little
won't
bit
be
of that
really.
imposter syndrome, more or less, is kind of what you're.
Yeah, yeah. It's
Okay.
like, again, if I've had any sort of success in this business, and I don't even know whatever the definition of that is,
Mhm.
it's because I just stuck to my guns and knew and told stories that I knew how to tell. So if my agents come to me with something, and I've had some really cool offers, man. I don't want to say them on here, just in case anybody might listen.
Yeah.
But yeah, I've met with showrunners and then end up passing on projects, and it's not easy to do because, and believe me, me and my girlfriend would have conversations afterwards, like, do I take this gig? What do I, what? But it's a 6 month, it's 24-week contract, but I just started a production company, and I have all these written screenplays that are already there, and I've already got a producing team, and we're already putting this stuff together. We're having conversations. I've already raised money from investors. So what does that look like? When you have investors that invest into your stuff, and then you say, wait a minute, let me put you on hold so I can go over here and make six figures for the next 6 months. Well, they're probably going to pull their money out, so it becomes this sort of balance that you have to play, and you have to be mindful of all the time. And I think at the end of the day, it's I try to think of it as, here I am at 39. What does 50 look like? And when I'm 50 and I look back on my career, it's like I can say, well, Kyle had Out of Exile, he had Bloodroot, he had The Shadow Catcher, he had The Vigilant, he had Dark Horse, he had Southern Cunning. But I mean, all the scripts I've written, or other scripts that we have bought or optioning, um, versus, you know, Walker Texas Ranger, on their TV series or something.
Right. Right.
Nothing
Right.
against that series. It's
Right.
just something I don't watch or I'm personally invested in.
Right.
And so I don't want to do stuff like that. And um, it's like I said, I, I know that I can make another independent film for $1 million, $4 million. Not, it's hard, but it's not that hard if you just do the work. If you put your mind into it and you obsess over it a little bit,
Mhm.
healthy obsession. you can get there, and you can do it. But just you got to take the work seriously.
Yeah.
Can't expect anyone to sort of knock on your door and say, "Hey, here you go. Here's your
Right.
movie." You literally have to do all the work yourself, and you have to have control of your destiny, kind of thing. And sometimes, I don't know if managers and agents sometimes always have the best interest. I think they do. They do want their clients to
But
be
a lot of
successful.
compromises that they were willing to make to kind
Right.
of get ahead more or less. Well, so this leads me to the next thing here for you, because and you've answered my question, but I kind of want to kind of go more in depth in this particular angle that I wanted to ask you about here, because I'm not going to say who, but I have spoken
Yeah.
with somebody
Okay.
that has worked on a project that I thoroughly enjoyed, and then they worked on some other projects that, without going specifics here, but I had opinions on the matter here.
Sure.
But once they had revealed to me about what was going on behind the scenes, where decisions that they've made, where they had intentions on doing one thing, but then something else came up along the way that they realized, you know what, if I do this, this would grant me more opportunities in other areas that I really want to do. So that way I can go back and forth in between doing this and then doing this at my own during my own time. So I don't have to worry about making those adjustments while having to answer for everybody here.
Yeah.
That's kind of on the bottom line here. And I think you understand what I'm referring to here. But the point I'm getting at is that I'm not saying that you were ever going to compromise, and I'm not saying this person did compromise, or they did, but it was a decision that I understood once they had shared that with me. But you understanding how that works and seeing that from the inside out. But for yourself though, if someone, let's say for example, and this is a hypothetical, I hope it doesn't sound like a silly question to ask here, but if someone were to come up to you right now and say, hey, listen, we love your films, but we would love for you to direct this movie here for us. Let's just use a big example of like Marvel. They say to you, we love what you've done with your movies. We have the story that we think will fit your sensibilities, but you have to do it within the confines of the storyline, the everything that we have in place here with all the other projects that we have coming down the line here. But you get to tell the story that you see best fit, so long as you meet these guidelines that we have in place. So with those stipulations, where they give you more or less free reins for you to tell your voice, share your voice on the project, so that way when they watch the film, people will know that's Kyle Harris's movie.
Yeah.
But clearly, it's under the Marvel guidelines here that they have in place. In that respect, are you able to make those type of compromises if the opportunity would be presented here, or would you completely just say no, I'm not interested in that at all, despite what the story is, which I'm interested in here, but none of those restrictions you have in place?
Man, I the very end right there, I'm somebody called me, and so you were muted, but
Oh,
but I get the gist of your question. The answer is yes, absolutely. I
okay.
think that there's always going to be a place where, if the project, again, it's you can, if the producer brings you something because they've seen your past work and they think, oh, this is a good fit for Kyle, or it's a good fit for Robert Medina. It's, if they really understand you, if they're one of those people that are a good judge of character and they're instinctually good at doing that. There's some people that are like that. Then yeah, you can read it and be like, okay, yeah, I understand this part here, or I can see how this works. Everything's always going to be changed no matter what. Even if the director signs on and he's cool with things, the actors are going to come in, they're going to have thoughts. The DP is going to come in, he's going to have thoughts on like how a scene goes. So it's maybe not changing the script, actors do, but um but yeah, I mean, everybody's going to have a thought in it. It's a collaboration, right? But yes, in a short answer is yes, I would be open to doing something if it was the right fit, for sure.
Are you very controlling of the script? So, like for example, like Quentin Tarantino, Wes Anderson, they're notorious for being completely in control of their script. That it's got to be the way that I've written it, and there's no compromise to make adjustments without my say so. Are you more or less one of those type of directors that does that as well?
But the answer is, man, I am good. Like I'm open to people making changes with the script as long as it makes the script better.
Okay.
You know.
Okay. So here's what I wanted to ask you about with the next question that I want to ask you about your take on the production here, because so essentially what I'm gathering here from you is that you are pretty much a team player, but uh,
Yep.
I guess I hope you understand where I'm coming from, because I'm certainly not implying that with what you said I don't believe, because I do, but there's still a part of me that believes that you still want to have full control.
Sure.
In majority of the capacity, in majority of the production that you're working on here, for obvious reasons, because you obviously want to make sure that the film that you are making turns out to be really, really good for people to take
Yes.
notice of it and so on. My question to you now is this. And again, I think you've already answered my question, but assuming that everything goes well with regards to the film being well received, everyone getting their money back, and then from there you have another set of projects that are going to work, that are going to be presented here to you for you to work on, bigger budgets, so on and so forth. At the end of the day, for you, what's the most important thing about the level of success that would come with it? And I'm not talking about fame and glory. That's not what I'm referring to, but the success that comes from from you being able to work on a film that people would connect with here, and then again present more opportunities. Like, so is the goal in mind to continue, obviously, to continue doing what you want to do and this passion you have here, but is your goal in mind to be able to continue with the success, to be able to tell more stories, or for you to find something else about yourself that you may have picked up along the way as you started to move on from one project to the next, that you realize, okay, I've got this now. I like what I do. I love this here. This brings in more my investment level at another level now, where I want to be able to pursue this here, but now I want to go about it from this angle here, because
Sure.
I can see what else I can do to expand on those things. I hope the question makes sense here, but it's essentially, I'm curious to see what really is your goal in mind about how you want to go about this moving forward here, because I think everyone has the question of like, you want to do it for the fame and glory, and I don't think that's a fair question to ask, because I don't think that's a reasonable goal in mind to have, because I think you walk in with empty calories at that point.
Yeah, and it's never been about fame or financial success. I think it's not about that at all. Matter of fact, if I can make a living doing this, if I can make a comfortable living doing this, I'm happy. Telling the stories I would like to tell. With that being said, um, if I get to a place where, I've written a lot of stuff and there's still like 10 screenplays that are equally as good as Out of Exile, I would say, that haven't even been produced yet. So I have a lot of stuff that I still want to say. But as those films get made as my tastes change, I mean, there's still a lot of stuff that I like, like Filmmakers, or and I might want to try telling that type of story. I mean, I'm ex-military, so there's a part of me that wants to do some like sort of military action thrillers and stuff like that. Um, there's a lot of things that I'd like to do. So, like some of my favorite films are like Tears of the Sun. I don't know if you've ever seen that movie.
Oh yeah, I saw it in theaters when it came out. Yeah,
Yeah,
it's a good
same here.
movie. It's an underrated
Yeah,
film, I think.
yeah,
One of
totally
Antoine
underrated.
Fuqua's best movies, I think, in my opinion.
Right, exactly. Yeah, I
Yeah,
love Antoine Fuqua, like Training Day. It's a
yeah.
cop film. It doesn't have anything to do with Failed Parenthood, you know. But it's just those types of movies. I just connect with those, like Training Days or Copland, Jim
Oh, that's a great
Mangold.
movie too. Yeah.
So it just depends on if the themes are still strong within the story, and if it's a genre that I'm interested in, like I'm again crime action thrillers. So like I'm not when I say action thriller, I don't mean the Transporter 4. Not that it's not that that's bad. It's just not my style. I think it's not my sensibility. It's a Fast 10. It's not my sensibility. Fast
Hmm.
and Furious 10.
But
So
do you
it's
like those type of movies though? Like, do you get some
I don't
enjoyment out
even
of
watch
them?
them.
Okay,
I don't
okay,
even watch them.
okay.
No, so it's I have to be just kind of personally interested in it. And this
Okay.
again, it's nothing against those filmmakers or those types of stories. Other people might like that. It's all subjective. It's just I don't know how to connect to that. It's probably just entertainment, and I want to have something in the material that says something. If it's not about stuff that is authentic to me, but still has strong themes about something else, then I'm very interested in it. Um, but I'm drawn to sort of the like Antoine Fuqua, the dirty cops movies, the
Hmm.
crime stuff, or he's done what Brooklyn's Finest,
Yeah.
Training Day, and then the military stuff like he's Tears of the Sun and Shooter, and the new one he's doing, The Terminal List. I mean, I've read all those books, and I know the new one's about to drop, so I can't wait. But that's another thing about being a writer, is that I think you have to sort of be a reader, right? I mean, I read a novel every 2 weeks probably, or a screenplay once a week, at least a new screenplay once a week. So content for me is like a big thing. So like I love content. I love reading things and getting ideas, and I'm watching movies. I'm watching a movie every night. Literally before bed, I'm watching a series or a new movie every night.
You fall asleep to it too?
I don't fall asleep to it.
Okay.
No, I go to bed kind of early. So about usually around 8 o'clock or so, I'll start a film or a TV series, and I'll watch a couple episodes of the series, or I'll watch the movie, and then I'll go to bed at around 10:30 or so. I get up early. But yeah, I mean, that could be an old film. It could be something new, something I've seen before. But I'm always doing that. So I'm at the end of the day, I'm a student. This always. So I never will ever have a big head like, oh, I'm so much better than those guys. That's not. You can't even think like that in this industry. If you're doing this, anyone that's doing it and having any success in it knows. Again, you can't just slip up and not do the work. You literally have to do the work to make a film good.
Right.
I mean, it's so easy for it to fall apart. You literally have to hold on to every little moving piece. And so now knowing that, when I see a movie, for instance, like Tears of the Sun or Training Day, and I know how good it is, that literally informs me that Antoine Fuqua knows what he's doing. Like, he's got control of that set, not in like a dictator form, but it's his sensibilities are in everything he's doing, and there's a lot of trust in the team. And I think that's just kind of where I'm trying to get to, building production company and building my team. And if I've had any success, it's because of my team that I've worked with. It could be the scripts I've written and the movies I've shot, but it's my editors, it's my cameramen, it's my composers, it's my actors like Adam Hampton and Kyle Jacob Henry and Wilson Navis and Mark Adam Goff, and all these people that I work with, continuously. It's because I see something in them, and they work hard too. And and they understand. Once you start understanding each other's language and what you need from each other, it's easy to get stuff done, and that's how you build success. I think if you're a loan shark, if you're in this business, or you're a man without a country, probably not going to make it in this business. You know what I mean?
So this leads me to a question that I'm curious about with you, because one thing you mentioned before in this conversation, in another one you had also had before, where you said when you came back to Oklahoma City that you were trying to get yourself involved with a crew of people that are making films out in Oklahoma, but it was very hard to break into that because everyone kind of created a tight-knit community where it's almost like you have to really, really be vetted out to be able to be in that inner circle. For yourself now, because you, in a lot of ways, from what I'm gathering, you're kind of creating that circle for yourself as well too. Do you have that same? I'm not saying that whoever it was you try to break in with here were shutting you out. I don't know if that's the case here, but I'm wondering if because you're now developing that circle for yourself, where you have people you work with that you trust, that work with you and understand how you go about things, and vice versa. Are you yourself experiencing that understanding of like, okay, now that I've created this here, I too am also very select about who I let in as well, because we have this well-oiled machine right now that having someone else come in and to be a part of it, we have to make sure that they can, understand our pace, our work ethic, and so on and so forth. So I'm curious to see how you look at that now for yourself. Yeah,
I mean, I'm not opposed to it. I understood why, I couldn't get in, or I didn't fit in the beginning. This is a kind of a cliquey type business in some ways too.
Yeah.
With some groups that get together and all they do is shoot commercials. And again, there's nothing wrong with that. Or they're a production company, but they can't quite find their footing, but they've got their little group together. So what is someone else going to offer? If we can't get it off the ground with these guys, what is he going to offer? So, and then building my team to the point where I'm at now, I am not opposed to have people come in. Matter of fact, on Out of Exile, I used the director of photography, Charles Elmore, great guy. My gaffer and my my B-cam operator, Andrew Appleyard. Just these guys there's and so many more. Brian Gilliland on sound, and Katie Worley on makeup, or Tony Marlowe on makeup, Taylor Goodman. There's so many people that I've worked with that I hadn't worked with before, and I would gladly go work with them again because they've proven to me that they can do this. And so if anybody comes along and has something to offer, I'm going to listen. But if they come in and they don't offer something, it's at the end of the day, the work will always speak for itself. There's a lot of talkers in the business, and I found that, again, if there's any success, it's because I didn't talk about making movies. I went out and made them, or I said, this is how I'm going to do it. This is when I'm going to shoot it, and then I find a way to make it happen. So you meet people that come in and go throughout your career, sure, and they say they want to offer something, or they want to be a part of your team, and you give them a chance. And then I've never fired anybody ever. I probably never would. I think people literally know when they're not holding up their end, and they'll kind of step away. Again, this business has a way of exposing people. If you don't do the work, the work will always speak for itself. So I learned that from some producers, and I've seen it from my own end, and that is the truth. You can sit there and put your stuff up on social media, and they look at me, look at how great I am. At the end of the day, when people see that film, they're gonna know. So I try to stay kind of off social media. I don't really post too much about the film stuff I do. So I'd rather just people come see the film, and then let's talk about it afterwards. And some people, if they don't like it, they don't like it. If they do, they do. But hopefully it's not because of the filmmaking is bad, or maybe they just understand where I'm coming from or something. But
what's it does, but so you brought up something that really piqued my interest about how you perceive this year. Critics. How do you personally handle that? Because that's one of the biggest things. Like, for instance, I review a lot of films, and when I first started, I was very, very green, but I was also more or less copying pasting what I've seen before about how the people do things, because I didn't really understand how to go about it. And a lot of things that I used to do was just rail on a movie that this was god awful, and then I said all these, these stupid things that were not really thought out. So as the years have gone by, I've gotten better, but I've gotten better in the sense that I understood the process more. So even if a movie didn't turn out as well for me personally, it's not because the film was awful, unless there is some awful things about the movie. But I'm talking about the editing, the pacing, the cinematography. Like, I try to look at all this, but then the overall story, how well the actor did. Maybe the story wasn't very good, but the actors were so phenomenal in the scene that this scene made me love the film. The film was okay, but I still love the movie because of this scene carried the movie. So, I come from a much different perspective than I did years ago, but not everyone thinks like that. And there are going to be a lot of people who will look at a movie and say, this is just like that film. Well, virtually every other film is like any other film. So it's kind of hard to be, separate from that. But I think the people people who do look at that way fail to realize that, how did the person take this story that we've seen before, but make it unique for providing their sensibilities and so on and so forth. So when you hear someone who, with the anticipation with Out of Exile coming out here, I'm not sure if you think are preparing about what the general consensus may be about the film, because if someone behind the scenes is saying, hey, this is really good, and presented you the opportunities, I'm not sure if that will give you the confidence to say, okay, so I think most of the people may like the film as well too. Not knowing how that will turn out. How are you preparing for that, and what could come down the line when it comes to critics having their thoughts on the film, while what they may like about it, what they may not like about, or better yet, someone that's intentionally saying bad things about the film to purposely hurt your career, to take away the opportunities for them to get the opportunities that you're after as well, if that makes any sense.
I don't think I've had anybody do that yet. I don't think there's been any sort of critic that's trying to hurt my career or said anything to hurt my career. I have come across an interesting angle that I thought about it, but I didn't really think that it was a big deal. And they presented it in a way where I was like, oh, okay, I can see that. but it wasn't my intention or something like that. I think honestly, when it comes to critics, I don't even look at it. If I don't have to, I won't. It's not important to me. To to hear what anybody has to say about the film is really not important to me. Honestly, it isn't. I think I make films. That whole word artist is used sort of weird
Yeah, yeah,
filmmaking, but it's like a painter. If a painter if Van Gogh's painting something, people come in and say, "Hey, I don't like your painting, man. I don't like it." He's going to be like, "Okay, I don't know what to tell you because it's not something he has control of." I think in some ways it's something that just kind of comes out of him, and that's his expression. He's expressing his voice, his sensibilities through
yeah.
his. I think it's what filmmakers do too, storytellers.
Well, here's the thing, and this is the kind of like the double-edged sword, because so I'm going to use Michael Bay as an example because he's someone that a lot of people have critiques about how shallow most of his films can be. Very few of his films like actually come out like this. I love The Rock or whatever the case may be. Right. But when you look at his filmography, with the exception of Hampton, which didn't do very well in the box office, but the previous ones before that, although critics hated the movie, and I would say in most cases probably the audience as well too, but the money is what got the studio to say, "Hey, it's made over $1 billion, man. We're going to make another one. The next one makes $1 billion." All the critics hated it, but it made money. So it didn't seem to hurt his career because, as you know, money talks.
Yeah.
But the interesting thing about what you said here, and I do agree with you, I really do. But coming from a business perspective, though, where someone says, "Hey, the critics hate the movie, but we're also not getting a lot of money back because the audience is not responding to it." Sure. And that word of mouth would help out. Now, there are a lot of great films that have come out that no one responds to. Like, for example, Shawshank Redemption, what came out, over 20 years ago, no one saw it, or I think it did well enough. I can't recall the exact detail, but it did enough. But then it started garnering more and more attention as the years have gone by. What's it called? John Carpenter's The Thing. No one saw that in theaters, and then now it's one of the most highly regarded films of all time.
My favorite
as picked up, right?
Films,
yeah, and so it's hard to really say what exactly counts as what if a film is really good, because the first batch of critics that a number of years ago said it wasn't very good, or the audience didn't go see it, but then it got a new set of life after the fact, where all of a sudden it brought back these correct directors or actors' name in the forefront now. But you just never know that's going to happen. But as far as the immediate term, where you have someone who's saying, "Hey, we're making money, but we're not making enough money to warrant for you to get the next budget for this next film," because the critics are railing the movie, audiences are responding to the film, but then they're quickly walking away from it because they're just not connecting with it. So we need a hit like now. What's the best thing you've got? And if you're in a position where you have to provide something that could speak to the audience rather than for you to speak to the project, if that makes any sense, I'm curious what your perspective on that is here when it comes to that form of critique.
Yeah. I did see Ambulance. I thought it was fun. My 13 hours, Michael Bay's 13 hours.
It's a great movie. I think it's an underrated movie.
Yeah. It's a marvel of filmmaking. To have that much control over all that stuff.
Yeah.
I think, I guess box office, I think, is mostly looked at on the big studio side. On the independent side, not so much, because it's straight to VOD. We never really know about those things. I can't speak for how everything is done, but I can see how some independent films on the VOD side that are straight to VOD, they work on sort of like a minimum guarantee stuff, like basis. So the distributor only finances the film, or production company only finances the film, knowing what they can, at their minimum, they're going to get back, if that makes sense.
Right.
So a lot of like stuff, like you get a certain actor attached and this co-star attached, then we know minimally that they're going to bring in $5 million just on sort of some chart or graph. They're going to bring in X amount of dollars. And so they'll give you that minimum amount to go make your movie, because they already know they're going to get that money back.
Right.
And so I guess that's sort of how some of the independent side of it works. big Hollywood, it's theatrical. And so it works a little bit different. But everybody knows that Michael Bay, even the big studios know that Michael Bay has delivered without made $1 billion on Transformers,
right?
And then Transformers 2. But then he did 6 Underground with Netflix, which Netflix, it's all viewership. And so if something like Ambulance doesn't do good theatrically, it's still a good film. I think it's just the distribution route that was taken, or something
the
along
marketing.
Those lines. Yeah, I don't think that they say, "Hey, Michael Bay, you're done," because he's still a great filmmaker and he delivers, and so he's gonna still have a career.
Yeah, I think the success rate that he has certainly outweighed the bombs that he would have garnered, which are very far in between.
And as an independent filmmaker, I guess you just have to have an instinct for the market. Not that I have any instinct for this market. It's just I watch enough movies and I read enough about the business, and I know who's doing what and what that's making. It's like trading baseball cards almost in some ways in this business. But it's so when you're writing a project, realistically that this thing, if you write something that's a crime drama similar to A Winter's Bone, that I'm not going to go make $30 million at the box office. I'm not going to go make $20 million. If I think I'm going to go, let's aim for like $5 million at the box office, and let's go make a movie for $2 million and aim for $5 million. So that, if you can think like that, and if it hits, great. But if it doesn't, then you're not living up here expecting all these gigantic expectations. I think that's how I do it. I don't, if people respond to it, that's the best thing for me. And I got lucky with Out of Exile,
Yeah.
I mean, there's something about the drop here soon. I don't know if I can say it online. My producer might call me afterwards and be like, "Kyle, what are you doing?" But we did pretty good on the back end with our distributor, and we made it for a small amount. And the majority of the cast is what's considered by distributors as no-name talent.
Yeah.
Even though some of the best actors I know, and hopefully they will be stars someday, and or what's considered star.
Yeah, I know what you mean.
But yeah, man, it's just it's just having an instinct for it and knowing that the things that you're trying to do have a place in the industry. It's like just kind of having good instincts for that,
So here's another thing I'm curious about with you. So, for example, like when I talked to Adam, and I was bringing up Rough Cut, which I think is a beautiful show, and I think what he had done on that show was fantastic. Everyone involved, with outside of production, actors involved, I think have done a phenomenal job. But the one thing about the show that I recalled specific is that there was one scene, the Shane Joseph scene, where a guy from Hollywood's coming in, giving people insight about questions they may have about the industry. Well, how can they make it, and so on and so forth. But one of the things he pointed out was the fact that you're in Oklahoma. You should not be here. You should be out in Hollywood or New York. That's where you really want to make. But if you make it, even if you go out there, you're never going to make it because it's a dog-eat-dog world. You have nothing to offer. Everything's already been said and done, and they already have what they want. So they're not going to listen to your story.
Yeah.
That being said, though, one thing I've noticed more and more throughout the years, and I think you've also noticed as well too, is that when you went out to Los Angeles, and I know you talked about it before, where you considered at certain points to moving out there, but the cost of living out there didn't seem reasonable for you with what you're trying to, for you to be able to get access to certain locations here, but coming back to a tiny facility. And then when you're going back to Oklahoma, you have more room, and the money definitely stretches out a little further out there. But it seems like everyone is now at a position where you don't need to go to these locations anymore to live there to get access to certain projects, because everything can be done via Skype. It can be emailed to you. And if you need to fly out, they'll fly you out. You're only there for a handful of days, and then you come right back home and pick up from where you left off. So the thing that's interesting for me now is that I'm noticing more and more that a lot of people are having a lot of projects they're working on, but they're all doing it from the comfort of their own home, making that their base. And I also noticed too that as the years have gone by, that it's becoming more and more apparent that the Hollywood landscape is changed a great deal as well. Atlanta's become a new hotspot. Louisiana, or New Orleans specifically, Texas, Austin, all these other locations are becoming major
Mexico.
hotspots. Canada has been always been a hotspot for years. But I'm curious for you though, because when you're working on these projects now and you're developing these scripts and you're creating with your production company that you've had created here, do you feel like now that the trajectory of the industry has changed from what it was X amount of years ago to where we are now, that it's much easier now to have certain films being made because you don't need the Hollywood system anymore to depend on financing the productions for you and then be able to get it elsewhere, so that way you can have it distributed through other means rather than going through the major studios? Because it seems like it's more and more apparent than it was many years ago. So I'm curious to see how your perspective on that is for yourself.
Yeah, I mean, independent film is always going to be here, right? It's always going to be here.
Right.
Film is always going to be here.
Yeah.
Not film, digital, or whatever. Movies will always be here. I think that, the pandemic really taught people how to work with minimal things. You don't need, like you said, we don't need to be in LA to do all these meetings. I didn't have to go fly to LA 3 times a year, spend a week there and do 25 meetings. You can do it at home from Zoom now. And that's only helped like independent filmmakers. Honestly, it's only helped them more so. I think something like Oklahoma, like with the rebate system that we have, it's really good for independent filmmakers. So whether it was Georgia or whether it was New Mexico or any of those places, New Orleans, I don't remember exactly how those places began the boom, but I'm sure it probably started with a rebate or a tax credit.
Right.
And then independent filmmakers or studios that were first independent filmmakers saw an angle, and that's what's happened in Oklahoma. And it just so happened to be that I was from here. When it 5 years ago was like a $2 million cap, then $5 million, then it was an $8 million. Now it's at $30 million through like 8 more years or something. So we went from 2 million 5 years ago to $30 million cap now. And there's like 3 different types of rebates here. So there's up to 35, up to 45% rebatable funds here in the state. So, I mean, you don't need a studio to finance you. You don't need a producer. Producers in LA aren't financing these movies. So independent filmmakers can find ways to get it done independently of Hollywood. There's no say in it. There's like, we're making out of Exile, or if I'm making this next film that I'm making we just had a huge offer to a famous actor. But even that, Hollywood's not going to have really any say. We can do it. We can do it independently of them. The only people I guess that have any say in that case would be the distributor. So
yeah,
whoever is financing the film, ultimately, if it's the distributor giving you a minimum guarantee, obviously they're going to have something to say. But they'll probably, if they greenlight your project, then it's because they believed in it up front. They read the script, they see who you want, who's the director, what has he done, who's producing it, what have they done, and then it's a green light. So they know pretty fast if they're going to get in business with you or not. And it's my second feature narrative, my sophomore efforts here. So, and they're cool with me. So, there's hope for independent filmmakers out there. It's just,
do you ever feel like it's going to get oversaturated though with the amount of?
Oh yeah,
yeah. So I mean, sure. What's your concern with that when it comes to, hey, if this guy's doing it, we can do it as well too, and then they may write a project that's not up to par, but the fact it's still getting funded and distributed, that it's like it's a wild west in a lot of ways here. So what's your perspective on that?
And in some ways, I've heard other big filmmakers like Scorsese. I've heard them talk about it, on podcasts or on, meetings and stuff like that, and they say it's an oversaturated market. And in some ways, I would say it kind of is, sure. And with digital, everybody can shoot a film nowadays.
Yeah.
And so that's, in a way that's kind of made things more accessible to independent filmmakers, right? So I think it comes down to the distributors knowing, there's a lot more just places to host content though now. I mean,
Yeah.
I think 5-6 years ago, I mean, now we've got Hulu and Netflix, and now Amazon Prime has become something, and now
Apple
Apple's
TV,
got one. It's like,
Tubi.
and I think in 5 more years, it'll probably, I mean, everybody got one now. So content, if it's good content, it's going to find a home. If it's, even though it's oversaturated, if it's bad, it'll find a way to weed itself out. The distributors will weed it out, or it'll go on a platform most people don't watch or something, sadly, or it goes like on YouTube or some kind of, self-distribution thing. And there's nothing wrong with that. It's just, that doesn't necessarily mean that the film is bad either. It just, it just happens sometimes. But
Yeah.
I mean, I try not to think about it. I don't try to think about the saturated market and stuff like that. I'm aware of it, but I just try to tell good stories. And I think with the slightly bigger budgets, I feel like the stories that I have written or the things that I do will have a home in the distribution market and on these platforms because of the stuff that I like that's comparable to the things that we've talked about, like
Right.
Tears of the Sun or Ben Affleck's The Town. I think people are always going to like those types of movies. You know what I mean? And
so here's something that I'm also really curious about with you. And I hope you're comfortable with me asking this question here. And if you don't want to answer, I completely understand. But I'm curious about the other side of the industry when it comes to working with talent. I'm not talking about just the actors. I'm talking about other people that you're working with, cinematographers, other producers, and so on. For yourself, how do you deal with the setbacks of personalities clashing? And again, I'm not asking for stories for you to share, but I'm just curious how you handle that for yourself, because you being the captain of the ship, more or less, where you have to have everyone cooperating, everyone's got to be on the same boat, and everyone's got to be working well with each other, or at least as well as they can, just for the shot that you need, and then everyone can go their separate ways. But when it comes to you having to deal with that for yourself, I'm not sure if that's something you've dealt with before, in other projects that were a lot smaller than what you have worked with on out of Exile, where you may come across bigger problems with bigger personalities that may be an issue that you have to, okay, so now that I'm dealing with this person here, how can I get them to cooperate with us to not hold everyone back here? So I hope, again, that's a fair question to ask. And again, I hope if you're not comfortable answering, I understand here.
Yeah, I think there's every project you do is going to have hiccups. There's going to be someone who's misinformed. I think that's all it is misinformed. If you, as a producer, okay, as a writer, if you tell a good story and it's clear, and then as a producer, you hire the right people and they're all clear on the vision or where this thing is going, what we're needing you for this X amount of days, for this many hours on these days. I think it's just, if everybody's informed, everybody can do a job pretty good. And I think if you have good info for this sort of industry and people, and you're able to read people, like, and I think if you're a writer, director, that's obviously all it is you have to be observant and read how human nature is so you can write it. So it's the same way when you go to talk to, as a director, you're talking to actors, or as a producer, you're hiring people. So I'm just mindful of it, observant of it. Like if I see like, oh, this person might be an issue. If there's another better person for the job, you might just hire that other person. Again, I always think that people kind of weed themselves out. They kind of do.
Okay.
And even with that, you might even have the best operator for a certain job, and then 2 weeks into the gig, there's a meltdown moment. I've seen it happen. It's just these people, just because they care. I think they care, they're passionate, and they want to do the best work. And then sometimes it's, if I've ever seen anyone ever have a meltdown on set, it's because of time. And because in independent film, you don't get a lot of time to do the things you want to do. And I don't think people understand that. If you see my film, and you see Ben Affleck's film, The Town. I'm not sure how many days he had to shoot it, but I can imagine it's probably around 50 or 60 days.
Right.
He had 2 to 3 months to shoot the film, and he had a humongous budget. Well, I had 20 days, and I'm shooting the same size film. All the same things. It's still the same guns going off, or still the same car stuff, or same fist fights, or same amount of locations, same amount of actors. It's just you don't have the time to go in there and shoot the film like they did, because they have time to sit there and go through every shot and block it. So, rehearse it with the actors and block it slowly so the camera is there. On independent film, you might only get 20 days. I had more shooting locations than I had shooting days. So we're moving 2 to 3 scenes, locations a day. And so sometimes you only have 1 or 2 takes and you got to go. So you have to be very clear in your communication to these actors, to the crew and everything. And if you're not prepared, it's going to come out. And so then people become misinformed, and then it becomes a breakdown. And that's when personalities can clash, or people can have problems on set. But I feel like it's just time. It's time a lot of times in independent film, I think, at least in my experience.
Again, as I mentioned earlier, Adam was very, very, I wouldn't say insistent, but he made it known you should talk to Kyle, because he felt like you had there was a lot that you have a lot to offer. But the thing that that really brought my attention to you, honestly, was really listening to you talk and how you were sharing your stories. Because it's one thing for me to see a good director, but if they don't have anything that I can connect with them outside of the film, not to sound pretentious, but I don't think I would want to talk with them, because there's nothing that I can bounce off of them where I can see what they've done, what the thought process was, and then get their story on how were they able to get to point A to point B, and then continue on from there.
Yeah.
So in hearing with what you shared with me so far, and then having listened to other conversations you've had in the past, I found your story to be unique in so many ways, to hear how you've been exposed to a lot of things and been very close to offers that most people would want, would kill for, and yet you've been able to more or less walk away from it, still be in that thin line between the Hollywood side of things as well as to the independent side of things here too. But you more or less found what works best for you, finding that voice and sticking down that path. That to me is a really important journey, because I think in the long term, the people that will remember those stories the most may not remember the films, but they'll remember the person behind the films. And that's what's more interesting for me personally. So I am still very much looking forward to checking out Out of Exile, because again, one of Adam's high points about the film is that he feels like it's one of his best performances he's ever delivered. Again, if Adam feels that way about him, about his performance, I'm watching.
It's good. He killed it.
I believe it. I believe it here too. But with that being said, though, I truly do want to thank you for giving me the opportunity and having this conversation. I would love to have this conversation again down the line, especially in preparation for Out of Exile, because I really would love to get more into it about, that side of the production as well too. But with that being said, though, is there anything else that you would like to point out to people being on the lookout for, that you were able to touch upon here, to for anyone that may be interested in looking through with what you're having coming down the pipeline?
I don't know yet what I can talk about. Like my Saban deal with Out of Exile, it hasn't been dropped online or anything yet, but I mean, we've been having these conversations on the side, so I know when it's going to come out and stuff like that. They haven't dropped that information yet. So my producers might be like, "Oh, you can't say that yet." Or, and the same thing goes with the film that I'm doing in Georgia this fall. It's again, it could all fall apart. I've seen it fall apart at the last second. You're $30,000 away from being fully financed, and then one major investor pulls out $100K or whatever, and then it just dies. It's just, all I can say is, I've got a production company going now with two guys, Matt Moulton and Jacob Snovel, and we have a really awesome slate of films that I would bet money on. And I would personally go see them if somebody else did them. You know what I mean? Like if somebody else produced and directed them, I would seek that project out because it's something that I know I would connect with. So I mean, I feel like I'm in a really good spot. It I would just give advice to the filmmakers. It's just work hard, don't be impatient, because it's real easy to get 3 or 4 months is not a lot of time when you're waiting on a reply. Realistically, in this kind of business, especially when you're like talking about money or a distribution deal or an actor, I mean, it could take a month to get a message back. It's just the way it is. It's just time works a little bit differently in the film industry, so it's to be patient, and to like just trust your instincts and always be a student to it and work harder than everybody else. Again, I think, like I said, the work will speak for itself in the end. So it's just, to work harder than everybody else. I would just give advice like that.
Okay. Well, on that note, we'll go ahead and close it off here for the camera. But again, I do want to say thank you so much for giving me your time. I was really looking forward to this here because Adam does speak very highly of you as well, too, as a person. So I trust when he says, check this person out, I'm looking into it here. So thank you again for your time.
Yeah.
All right. So.